right? July 8th, 2026. Trump is standing in front of 31 NATO leaders at the summit in Ankara, Turkey. And he says, and I'm quoting directly here, Iran is scum, cuckoo, okay? A cancer, 3 words, in front of the entire North Atlantic Alliance. And immediately, within hours, every major news network on earth agreed on the narrative. Iran attacked commercial ships. Iran violated the agreement. Iran is the aggressor. Iran started it. Guys, I need you to stop for just 1 second, because the story you just heard, the story that CNN is running, that the BBC is running, that Al Jazeera is running, that story is exactly what someone very powerful wants you to believe. And today I'm going to show you 3 things that almost nobody is talking about. Number 1, Trump did not break the memorandum of understanding because Iran attacked ships. Trump broke the MOU because he needed Iran to attack ships. He needed a reason to get out. And he engineered that reason from the very first day. Number 2, while the United States and Iran are busy shooting at each other, there is a third party, not Israel, not Saudi Arabia, not China, sitting quietly in the background, counting money. And that party has not fired a single bullet into the Middle East. Not one. Number 3, even if America wins this war, even if they bomb Iran back to the Stone Age, even if they sink every IRGC vessel in the Persian Gulf, they will never, and I mean never, actually control the Strait of Hormuz. Not because of Iran's military strength, because of something far more structural, far more permanent. Okay? Let's get into it. Before I show you the evidence, I need to give you a framework, a mental model. Because without this model, the events of July 8th look random. They look like chaos. And they are not chaos, not even close. I call this framework the exit trap. And here's the concept. It's actually really simple once you see it. Imagine you sign a lease on an apartment. But here's the thing. You didn't actually want to sign that lease. You were pressured into it. Maybe by your family, maybe by business partners, maybe by political allies who said, look, we need to show the world we can negotiate. So you sign. But the moment the ink dries, you already want out. Now the problem is, if you just walk away, if you just unilaterally cancel the lease, you have to pay penalties. And more importantly, you look like the bad guy. You look like the one who broke their word. So what do? You make the landlord violate the lease first. You leave noise complaints unaddressed. You let small rule infractions slide, not because you don't notice them, but because you're waiting, you're accumulating. And then at exactly the right moment, you set up a situation, deliberately, carefully, where the other side has to respond, where they have to push back, where they have to do something that gives you legal and moral cover to say, they broke the deal, not me, them, and then you walk away clean. That is the exit trap. And I want you to hold that concept in your mind for the next 15 minutes, because every single piece of evidence I'm about to show you fits this model perfectly. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go. June 17th, 2026. The Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran is signed. 14 points. A 60-day negotiation window. Oil export licenses for Iran. Hormuz passage protocols. The whole package. And on that same day, June 17th, the day of the signing, Trump steps to the microphone and says, again, I'm quoting, "If I don't like what I see, we'll bomb immediately." Now, I need you to think about what that means. You do not say that at a signing ceremony unless you are signaling something, unless you are sending a message, not to Iran, not to the diplomats in the room, but to your own domestic base. You are saying, I signed this, but I'm not committed to this. I'm already looking for the exit. Okay, you might say, that's just Trump being Trump. He talks tough, he postures, fair, I hear you. Let's look at what happened next. The MOU gives both sides 60 days. 60 days to sit down, talk, work through disputes, use the established communication channels before either side can escalate militarily. 60 days. That's not 60 hours. That's 2 full months. An eternity in geopolitics. So here's my question. I want you to really sit with this question before I give you the answer. In those 60 days, across all 14 points of the MOU, how many times did the American side reach out through the official MOU diplomatic channel to raise concerns, to flag a problem, to say, hey, we think you're not complying with Article 5, let's talk about it? How many times? 0. Not a few times, not once, 0. Instead of using the 60-day window For diplomacy, the United States set up what's being called the Oman route, a shipping lane that put commercial vessels directly into waters that Iran had already designated under the MOU as their Hormuz oversight zone. Waters where Iran had specifically warned that unauthorized passage would be considered a provocation. So to be clear, America had a 60-day diplomatic window. They used zero of it for diplomacy. Instead, they sailed ships into exactly the waters Iran said not to sail ships into without going through the notification channel that the MOU had established for exactly this purpose. Does that sound like a party that wants the deal to succeed? Or does that sound like a party that's setting up a situation, July 8th, the date America launched over 80 airstrikes against targets in southern Iran? Why July 8th? Why not July 1st? Why not June 30th when the 60-day window was closing? Why not a week earlier or a week later? Because on July 8th, Trump was standing at the NATO summit in Ankara in front of 31 allied heads of state. Think about that staging. Think about that optics. He drops bombs on Iran while standing in front of the entire alliance. The message is unmistakable. You need us. We are the only ones willing to act. Europe, Japan, South Korea, you all need America. So stop complaining about trade tariffs. Stop complaining about NATO spending. Look what we just did. This is not military strategy. This is political theater executed at the highest possible level. The bombing of Iran was the backdrop for a performance at NATO. Now, I could be wrong. I genuinely could be. Maybe the timing was pure coincidence. But here's what I know. In 40 years of studying geopolitics, when I see a military action timed to the hour of a major multilateral summit, I do not call that a coincidence. I call that a production. Okay? Now we get to the mechanism, the actual legal trap. On July 8th, same day as the airstrikes, the United States revoked General License X. For those of you not familiar, General License X is the document that allowed Iran to legally export oil during the mobile negotiation period. It was part of the agreement. It was written into the deal as Article 10. Iran said, we will engage in good faith negotiations, but we need economic relief while we negotiate. And the US agreed. Article 10. In writing, Trump revoked it on July 8th, the same day as the airstrikes. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because when Iran responds, when Iran says, you violated Article 10, we have the right to defend our interests, America says, no, you attacked commercial ships first. You are the aggressor. You broke the deal. And Iran says, no, you pulled the oil license first. You violated Article 10. We were responding, and the entire world gets to argue about who did what first, because the two actions happen within hours of each other on the same calendar day. Guys, you see what happened there? The sequence was engineered to be ambiguous. When both sides can claim the other acted first, there is no clean narrative of aggression. There is only chaos. And in that chaos, the party with better PR wins the story. And America has much better PR than Iran. That is the exit trap closing. And then there is the final number. The number that tells you how precisely this was calculated. At the moment General License X was revoked, there were 63 million barrels of Iranian crude oil sitting in tankers around the world, in transit, waiting to be delivered. 63 million barrels. At market prices, on July 8th, that is approximately $5 billion. All of it frozen, instantly, with one signature. Not seized, not destroyed, just frozen. Sitting there, inaccessible to Iran. $5 billion gone in a day. Not because of bombs, not because of military action, because of paperwork. And you wonder why Iran launched strikes on 85 American military sites across Bahrain and Kuwait that night? You wonder why they shot down an MQ-9 Reaper drone. They were furious. Of course they were furious. They had just lost $5 billion before breakfast. And that fury, that predictable, completely foreseeable fury, is exactly what the exit trap was designed to produce. Okay? I have to stop here, because I do something in every single one of these lectures that I think is non-negotiable if you want to take analysis seriously. I present the strongest possible case for the side I'm arguing against, not a weak version of their argument, not a straw man, the actual strongest version. Because if I can't address the strongest version, then I'm not doing analysis, I'm just doing advocacy. And that's not what this channel is about. So the strongest argument that Iran is guilty, that Iran broke the deal, that Iran is the aggressor, here it is. Iran attacked at least 3 commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz before the American airstrikes on July 8th. This is not disputed. AIS data, automatic identification system, the GPS equivalent for ships, shows those vessels going dark, losing signal in Iranian-controlled waters. Multiple shipping companies have confirmed damage. Lloyd's of London has already invoked war risk clauses on new Persian Gulf policies. The attacks on commercial shipping happened. Iran did it. And you know what? That argument is strong. That argument is real. I'm not dismissing it. But here's the question you have to ask before you accept that argument as definitive. Why were those ships there? Why did the United States route commercial vessels through waters that Iran had flagged, through the official MOU channel? One of the only times they actually used it as potentially disputed passage. Why did no American diplomat pick up the phone in 60 days to say, hey, we've got some ships coming through, let's make sure we're aligned on the protocol? Why was General License X revoked at the same moment as the bombing and not a week earlier or a week later, which would have created a cleaner sequence of events? The strongest counter-argument to my thesis is that Iran attacked commercial ships. That is true, but it does not answer those four questions. And until you can answer those four questions, you cannot close the case. Let me be honest with you. This is my interpretation. This is my reading of the pattern. I could be completely wrong about the intent. But I will tell you this. In political science, we have something called the principle of parsimony, Occam's razor. The simplest explanation that accounts for all the evidence is probably the right one. And the simplest explanation that accounts for zero diplomatic contact, ships in disputed waters, simultaneous bombing, an oil license revocation, and a military action timed to a NATO summit, the simplest explanation for all of that at once is not a series of unfortunate coincidences. It's a plan. Okay? Let's move to part 2 of today's lecture, because this is where it gets really interesting. I want you to think about something. While every camera in the world was pointed at the Persian Gulf on July 8th, while every journalist was writing about Hormuz and IRGC strikes and MQ-9 drones and oil prices, where was Vladimir Putin? What was he doing? At 1:19 in the morning, Moscow time, on July 8th, Russia launched its third ballistic missile strike of the week against Kyiv and Kharkiv. 1:19 a.m., same night, they fired 54 ballistic missiles. Ukraine intercepted 4 out of 54. Now, why was Ukraine's interception rate so catastrophically low? Ukraine has Patriot systems. Ukraine has been defending against Russian missiles for years. They've gotten quite good at it. The answer is that a significant portion of the Patriot interceptor stockpile, missiles, not just systems, the actual ammunition, had been quietly redirected toward the Middle East theater in the weeks prior. The US and its allies have finite stocks of high-end interceptors. When you need them in one place, you pull them from somewhere else. Putin knew this. This was not a guess. This was calculated. He hit Ukraine hardest at the exact moment American air defense capacity was most strained. He didn't need better missiles. He just needed to wait for the right distraction. And the Middle East crisis handed him that distraction perfectly. But okay, you might say Putin opportunistically attacks Ukraine. He does that anyway. What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. Brent crude oil prices increased by 6% on July 8th, from approximately $73 per barrel to $78, 6%. In one trading day, Russia exports approximately 7 million barrels of oil per day. That number is actually conservative given their shadow fleet operations through the Caspian Sea and alternative routing through Central Asia. 7 million barrels times $4 to $5 of additional revenue per barrel. Every single day. I'll let you do the math, but I'll tell you this much, it's not a small number. And Putin earned every dollar of it without deploying a single asset in the Middle East. Not a ship, not a drone, not a soldier, not a ruble spent on Hormuz. He just waited. Now, there's a deeper layer here. And this is where it goes from interesting to genuinely alarming. Russia and Iran have a standing intelligence sharing agreement. This is documented. It covers satellite targeting data, electronic intelligence, real-time battlefield coordination. When Iran struck those 85 American military sites across Bahrain and Kuwait, and when they shot down that MQ-9 Reaper drone, those operations required precise targeting data. Data that a country like Iran, under severe satellite and surveillance restrictions, does not generate entirely on its own. Russia provides that data. So here is the full picture on July 8th. Russia provides Iran with targeting intelligence. Iran uses that intelligence to strike American assets in the Gulf, America responds by pouring more military resources into the Middle East. That draws resources away from Europe. Russia then attacks Ukraine with maximum force at minimum interception. And simultaneously, Russian oil revenue spikes because the war they helped engineer has pushed oil prices 6% higher in one country. 4 outcomes, 0 direct military action in the Middle East. That is not opportunism. That is architecture. And there is a name for this architecture. Strategic analysts call it the CRINC model. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. The theory, and it's not just a theory anymore, it's an observable pattern, is that these 4 actors coordinate to create simultaneous pressure on American strategic bandwidth at multiple theaters at the same time. Ukraine, Hormuz, the Taiwan Strait, the Korean Peninsula, 4 theaters, 1 superpower, finite resources. The CRINC model doesn't need any of these 4 countries to win a direct war with America. It just needs America to be fighting in enough places at the same time that it can't win any of them decisively. Military planners have a phrase for this: strategic overload. You don't defeat the enemy, you exhaust them. And right now, on July 8th, 2026, that strategy is working, okay? Now I want to level Hormuz directly because there's a fantasy that's been circulating in certain American policy circles, and I want to address it as directly as I can. The fantasy is this: if America applies enough military pressure, it can achieve what strategists call Hormuz dominance, the ability to open or close the strait at will, to project absolute control over the 21% of global oil supply that passes through those waters. It's a compelling fantasy. I understand why people believe it. America has the most powerful Navy in human history. America has more carrier strike groups than the next 10 navies combined. On paper, controlling a 33-mile wide waterway seems achievable. But let me give you 3 reasons, 3 structural, permanent, not going away reasons why Hormuz control is a fantasy, not a difficult goal. A fantasy. The navigable shipping lane through the Strait of Hormuz, where actual tankers pass, is approximately 3 kilometers wide in each direction. 3 kilometers, that's less than 2 miles. You don't need a navy to shut that down. You need mines. Modern naval mines are extraordinarily sophisticated. They have magnetic sensors, acoustic sensors, pressure sensors. They can be programmed to activate after a certain number of vessels pass over them, so they let through the first few ships to avoid detection and then activate. They can sit dormant on the seafloor for months before activating on command. Iran has been producing and stockpiling advanced naval mines for decades. Their Mosaic defense doctrine, which I'll explain in just a moment, specifically incorporates mine warfare as a denial strategy. The U.S. Navy's mine countermeasure capability is actually one of its weakest areas. Pentagon auditors have said so repeatedly. Clearing a minefield in a contested 3-kilometer lane under fire against a motivated adversary on home territory is not a days-long operation. It is a weeks to months operation. Every day those mines are in the water, the global oil market is disrupted. Every day prices spike. Every day economies take damage. America might eventually clear the mines, but the economic damage would be done long before the clearing is complete. Now let me tell you about the Mosaic defense doctrine, because this is the thing that American military planners have the most trouble with conceptually. Iran has divided its military command structure across all 31 of its provinces. Each province has an independent command authority, independent weapons stockpiles, independent communication networks, and critically, independent authority to act even if Tehran is destroyed, even if central command is severed, even if the supreme leader is dead. There is no central node to strike. There is no command and control headquarters that, if destroyed, stops the Iranian military from functioning. The architecture was specifically designed so that decapitation, the American military's preferred approach of targeting leadership, is ineffective. Does that remind you of anything? It should remind you of Iraq, 2003. America destroyed Saddam Hussein's military in 21 days. 3 weeks, the fastest major military victory in modern history. And then they spent the next 20 years fighting a decentralized insurgency that had no headquarters, no uniform, no chain of command they could target. Iran watched Iraq and built an entire national defense doctrine around that lesson. They looked at what happened when you have a centralized military against the American war machine, and they said, we will never fight that way. We will fight distributed. We will fight cellular. We will fight so that every village, every province, every unit can fight independently, indefinitely. You cannot occupy a country that is organized this way. You can bomb it. You can cause incredible damage, but you cannot achieve the strategic objective of control, because control requires someone to surrender. And in a mosaic defense structure, there is no single entity that can surrender on behalf of the whole. And here's the third reason, the one that almost nobody is discussing, the one that makes Hormuz dominance not just militarily difficult, but geopolitically obsolete. In May 2025, 1 year before this war began, China completed the Iran-China Railway, a land-based rail corridor that connects Iranian oil fields to the Chinese market through Central Asia. No ships, no Hormuz, no American naval power relevant. That railway was completed a full year before the first bomb fell on Iran on July 8, 2026, 1 year before. You do not build $1 billion railway through some of the world's most difficult terrain by accident. You build it because you are anticipating a scenario in which Hormuz is not reliable, in which the maritime route is contested. China spent years and enormous resources building their insurance policy against exactly the crisis we're seeing now. And in the Caspian Sea, Russia and Iran operate what analysts call the shadow fleet, vessels that move oil and weapons through routes that American surveillance cannot easily monitor using flags of convenience, transponder manipulation, and routing through third country ports. This fleet has grown substantially since Western sanctions intensified after 2022. So the picture looks like this. Iran has a railway to China for land exports. Iran has a shadow fleet with Russia for Caspian exports. And Iran's oil can reach its primary customer, China, without a single tanker going anywhere near Hormuz. But wait, there's one more piece to this, and it's the most ironic piece. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, America's closest Gulf allies. They have been quietly building pipeline infrastructure to route oil exports to the Red Sea, specifically to bypass Hormuz. Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline, the UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline. Both bypass Hormuz entirely. America's own allies are building infrastructure that renders Hormuz control irrelevant to them. Think about that. If even Saudi Arabia and the UAE are hedging against a future where Hormuz is contested, a future they are building toward right now, then the strategic premise of American Hormuz dominance is not just wrong, it's something that America's own partners don't believe in. The world is building around Hormuz, not because Iran is winning, because rational actors plan for multiple futures. And the future where Hormuz is reliably open is looking less and less reliable, okay? Let me bring this all together because I want to make sure we're clear on the three core arguments of today's lecture before I give you the homework and the question I want you to sit with. Argument one, Trump's exit from the MOU was not a reaction to Iranian aggression. It was a choreographed exit from a deal he never intended to honor, executed through the exit trap, engineering the conditions that would make Iran's response look like the first act of aggression. The zero diplomatic contact over 60 days, the Oman route provocations, the simultaneous oil license revocation, and bombing, all of it points to a plan, not a reaction. Argument two, the primary beneficiary of the July 8th crisis is not Israel, not Saudi Arabia, not any actor in the Middle East. It's Russia. Oil revenue up 6%. Ukraine exposure reduced as American air defense assets shift east. Intelligence support to Iran yielding American military attrition in the Gulf. Strategic overload on American bandwidth across 4 simultaneous theaters. Russia spent nothing on this outcome. They just positioned themselves correctly and waited. Argument three, even in a scenario where America achieves total military dominance over Iran, which is not happening, but even if it did, Hormuz control is structurally impossible. Mine warfare creates weeks-long disruption windows. Mosaic defense means no central authority to defeat. And China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE have all built or are building bypass infrastructure that makes Hormuz a sideshow to the real energy geopolitics of the 2030s. Now, 3 things to watch in the next 72 hours. First, What does Moscow say about Hormuz? Or more precisely, what does Moscow not say about Hormuz? Watch the Russian Foreign Ministry statements. Watch Putin's press conferences. If Russia is staying conspicuously silent about events in the Persian Gulf while simultaneously escalating in Ukraine, that silence is a strategic choice. Silence that benefits you is a form of action. Second, what does Iran do with those 63 million frozen barrels? If Iran attempts to route that oil through the China Railway, if they move toward a non-maritime, non-dollar oil transaction with Beijing, that is a signal that they are settling in for a long conflict, not positioning for a negotiated settlement. Watch the tanker data. Watch the China imports data. That 63 million barrels tells you everything about Iranian strategic intent. Third, watch Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. These two men are widely understood to be the architects of the original MOU. They negotiated it, they believed in it. If Trump has just blown up their deal, and the evidence suggests he has, what does that mean for the internal coherence of American foreign policy? A president who destroys his own negotiators' work doesn't just lose a deal, he loses the next deal too. Because nobody on the other side of the table will believe that signing an agreement with America means anything. This week's homework. Find the original text of the MOU, signed June 17, 2026. Read Article 5 and Article 10 in full. Specifically, I want you to focus on who holds definitional authority. Who gets to define what constitutes homeland control under Article 5? Who gets to define what constitutes a violation under Article 10? When you read those two articles carefully, when you look at the actual legal language, you will understand why both sides can simultaneously claim the other is wrong, because the document was written to be ambiguous. Whether that ambiguity was intentional is a question I'll leave for a future lecture. And now the final question, the one I want sitting in the back of your mind tonight. On July 8, 2026, Donald Trump stood before 31 heads of state at the NATO summit in Ankara and declared the Iran MOU over. He called Iran scum. He called Iran cuckoo. He called Iran a cancer. He did all of this in front of the cameras of the world. And that same night, Vladimir Putin fired 54 ballistic missiles into Ukraine. He said nothing about Hormuz. He said nothing about Iran. He said nothing about the oil price spike. He just fired missiles into Ukraine and collected the revenue and shared the satellite data and waited. The question is not who is right and who is wrong between America and Iran. The question is, why did Putin say nothing about Hormuz, nothing at all, while launching the largest ballistic missile attack on Ukraine in 3 weeks on the same night at the same hour, when the most powerful nation on earth is screaming about Iran, and the second most powerful nation on earth is completely silent about the very crisis that is making them billions of dollars. That silence is not neutral. That silence is a strategy. And understanding that strategy tells you more about where this is going than anything Trump or Iran announced. Think about that. This has been Professor Policy Insights. Thank you for being in class today. I will see you in the next one.